Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, a special episode from the Association of the United States Army's annual conference in Washington, D.C. We've got the Secretary of the Army on hand to talk about the latest issues facing the force. Find out what she has to say. Also on tap, we check in with the Rapid Capabilities and Critical Technologies Office to get a sense of what they're working on. A cannon that shoots down missiles? It's on the way. Plus, we go to the floor to get a look at the latest weapons headed for soldiers and other tech on offer at the conference. We're bringing out the big guns for AUSA, so don't go away. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Diana Stancy. It's AUSA time, that time of year the military's biggest force gathers for its largest conference in the nation's capital to talk about what's ahead for the force and wheel out the next-gen tech. We snagged a lot of the leading lights of the Army for updates on the big topics facing soldiers, leaders, and defense industry partners, and we'll kick it off with a big one. Army Secretary Christine Wormuth sat down with land warfare reporter Jen Judson for a conversation about how global turmoil impacts the Army and how it shapes the way the force evolves itself to meet threats. Have a look.
Wanted to dive in and talk first about the threat environment. You're seeing it change. We're watching in Ukraine, we're watching what's going on in the Middle East. What are some of your big takeaways in terms of how the threat is evolving over this past year and how that's influencing some of the things you're looking at?
Well, I think a couple of things really, Jen, are most notable to me. The first is sort of the number of challenges that we have simultaneously. You know, last year when we were here, we were probably focused significantly on what was going on with Ukraine. Now, obviously, the CENTCOM theater is once again, very busy and very volatile. And I think the other thing that's become more clear since a year ago is what I would call the sort of occasional pragmatic cooperation between Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. Again, not all four all together all the time, but in different combinations. I think all four of those countries have an interest in making life difficult for the United States. That's one thing they share. And I think that dynamic has become more evident in the past year.
How are those shifts in threats and adversary capabilities influencing how the Army prioritizes its modernization efforts? Are some of those shifting or causing a rethinking or reshuffling of focus when it comes to modernization plans, or even how the Army will build formations in the future?
I think what it's really emphasizing to me again is, particularly with the flat top line, we have just got to do everything possible to get the most bang for the buck. I think, any of our individual modernization portfolios still make sense, are still relevant, but it's about finding opportunities to bring programs to the left where we can. It's about pushing ourselves even harder to identify perhaps programs of record of a few years that maybe aren't as purpose-built for the future, and making tough decisions about those.
Yeah, and we've seen that, in very recent history here with the budget, you had to pivot on the extended range artillery cannon system. That obviously that requirement isn't going away. You're finding other solutions. You've canceled the future attack reconnaissance aircraft as you reassess what aviation is going to look like and the balance of unmanned and manned. So we're seeing that. What are some of your observations when it comes to the Transforming in Contact initiative that you and the chief have been spearheading over the past year, and how that is helping to inform building formations as well?
Yeah, I think, I like to put Transforming in Contact into context, and we're really looking at Army transformation in 3 different time frames. You know, we have the sort of beyond the FIDIP, looking, you know, to 2040, and we're doing a lot of great work with our warfighting concept. We have sort of that middle time period, which is the 5-year defense program, you know, sort of 3 to 7 years from now. And then we have the immediate time period of the next year or two. And to my comment about our flat top line and wanting to get the most bang for the buck, what we're using Transforming in Contact to do is really help us figure out, with things that we have right now, perhaps in small numbers, or with opportunities that commercial off-the-shelf systems present, how can we experiment with that, see which systems are promising, you know, maybe make adjustments to our MTO, our tables of equipment, and also learn about new tactics, perhaps, to use some of these capabilities in a different way.
Next up, you can't have an army without weapons, and you can't beat a foe without modernizing what you're shooting with. Muskets were fine at one time, but firearms need to evolve if a fighting force is going to stay ahead. At AUSA, the Army's next-generation squad weapons and its modernized ammunition were on display at the Sig Sauer booth, and our own Todd South dropped by to have a look. Check it out.
So we're here at AUSA at the Sig Sauer booth, and we're looking at the next generation squad weapon. Now that's been in the headlines for a number of years, and right here we have the XM7, which is basically the replacement for the M16 or the M4. It's not technically a carbine, it is a rifle, but it's going to be replacing that for the close combat forces, such as your infantry, paratroopers, scouts, combat engineers. They'll be carrying that as their primary weapon. Over here we have the XM250, that's going to be replacing the M249 SAW. It will basically be the light machine gun for the squad and even the platoon. Both are going to be chambered in the 6.8 millimeter caliber. Now that's a newly created round. SIG is building that round, the Army is building that round. It basically cuts the difference between the existing 5.56 millimeter round that's present in the SAW and in the M4, but it's smaller than and lighter than the 7.62 millimeter in the M240, a little bit of a heavier or more of a medium machine gun. Now the 6.8 millimeter gives the performance of a 7.62, sometimes even better, but in a smaller package, giving people more accuracy, giving shooters more distance and range. Some of the new news of this is the feeling. Basically the Army is announcing unit by unit how it's rolling this out each fiscal year. Now this past year, in the spring, the 101st Airborne Division was the first to field this weapons package, along with its new optic and other accessories. Coming in this next fiscal year, basically starting at the end of 2024 through and into mid-2025, you have most of the units starting out in the Pacific, because that's where the Army's seeing its biggest threat. It wants its best and newest equipment with units going to the Pacific to counter China and any kind of problems they might face there. Now, in addition to those fieldings, there's some new developments coming with the optic. The optic is called basically a fire control. So standard ways we would think about an optic was, you know, a scope, you look through the standard glass, you see your reticle, you align on your target. But optics these days, we call them fire control for a reason, because they can do aiming lasers built in, they can have ballistics calculators and different types of data packages. Basically the new optic, the XM157, is built by Vortex and Shelter Wings, a separate company from Sig Sauer. They're creating this optic to pretty much give all those tools that a sniper would have had in past conflicts into the standard hands of a basic infantryman, to adjust fire on the fly, to use on any kind of weapon system. Almost any weapon in the Army's inventory is going to have a ballistics package in that computer. So you can strap it onto an M4, you can mount it onto the XM7, the XM250, calibrate it in minutes probably, and be right on target. Now what they're doing to upgrade that is they want better sensors. I mean, they're having good accuracy at ranges, they want to be able to calculate distance, barometric pressure, all kinds of things that go into the flight of the bullet's path as it reaches the target. And those are the upgrades they're looking for. The Army's announced recently that they're going to be showing to industry some of what they want out of future sensor packages for the optic, which is a key piece of how this system is going to work in any kind of future combat, keeping soldiers lethal and accurate on the battlefield. So these are obviously not to real size, okay? These are much larger just to show a difference. Sometimes it's difficult to see on a camera, in a photo, or even in a diagram, the differences between, say, a 5.56 round, which people are very familiar with, 7.62, which people are also very familiar with, and the new 6.8. So right now, right here, you see the different weapon calibers lined up. Now, the 7.62 is your standard. It goes into the, say, M240 machine gun. It's a little bit heavier machine gun, but classified as a medium machine gun. It's been in the arsenal. That caliber's been in the arsenal since the early 1900s, actually. The 5.56 is the smallest you see here. That's what's currently fielded in the M4, the M16, and the SAW. It's a lighter round developed out of a varmint cartridge many decades ago. First fielded to the Army with the M16 in, I believe, 1967. Between these two, you have 6.5 and 6.8. Now, the 6.5 is closer to the 6.8, but not exactly what we see with the 6.8. That's been used by the SOCOM community, Special Operations Command, for different types of weapons and calibers, and even in sniper rounds. The 6.8 is a wholly new developed cartridge and caliber and round, developed by the Army, being built by SIG at one of their ammunition plants, as well as there's a line being built at the Army's official Lake City ammunition plant just to build 6.8 millimeter. They need to build up a stockpile of this ammunition for operational units to be able to rotate and have plenty of rounds should they have to go to combat, but also have rounds to train with. Another interesting development they're working on now on the JPEO, or Joint Program Executive Officer Ammunition and Armaments for the Army, that's in Picatinny, New Jersey. Picatinny Arsenal, New Jersey, sorry. That is actually going to develop a one-way tracer round. So we always think of tracers of having, the enemy can see where it's shooting from because it's lit the entire time. The one-way luminescent tracer round is a project that's been in development for years for all these small calibers, and now they're adding 6.8 to it. And that's going to give the ability, once it's fielded, to shoot, and you can see where your tracer round is going, but the enemy can't see where it's coming from. And that's going to create a very tactical advantage for the shooter on the battlefield to be able to conceal their position, direct fires onto a target, accumulate fires from other platforms onto that target using tracers, but not be seen at the same time. So there's a lot of development, not just with the weapon systems, but also with the ammo that's going to affect existing legacy platforms like the 5.56 and the 7.62, and of course, the new 6.8 millimeter round. This is Todd South with Army Times.
When we return, a cannon that shoots hypervelocity air defense rounds? Yes, please. We hear about it when we come back. Welcome back. Okay, here's what we want to do. We want to take this artillery piece over here and put a round in it that will go fast enough to hit an incoming missile, and we want it to be cheap. Sounds easy enough. Meet the Army's multi-domain artillery cannon system. Jen Judson learned about this project and more from the director of the Rapid Capabilities and Critical Technologies Office at AUSA. Have a look.
Hello, Lieutenant General Rash. Thank you for joining us. You're at the Rapid Capabilities and Critical Technologies Office, otherwise known as RTO. Appreciate you being here. I know you have a busy schedule here at AUSA, but I wanted to dive into some of the programs that your office is working on. You know, you get a lot of attention for things like hypersonic development, directed energy, but recently we discussed the multi-domain artillery cannon program. So can you talk a little bit about what you're doing there with that specific effort?
Sure, and great to see you, Jen. I hope you're having a great conference. So, multi-domain artillery cannon system is a new start for RTO. Obviously, we're waiting on appropriations, but really picking up a science and technology effort that's been worked at the Strategic Capabilities Office for a long time, really trying to get after the cost curve on engaging, in the air missile defense domain. Everything now, and we've got very, very capable effectors on the missile side of the house, but they're very expensive. So multi-domain artillery cannon system is an attempt to develop a operational prototype capability that uses a hypervelocity projectile out of a traditional artillery cannon system to lower the cost, the projectile being less expensive than an interceptor, to get at some of our more advanced threats. Really excited about this. This is going to be a go fast RTO effort. I've got about 3 years to take this capability and get it to a battery level configuration so we can take it out into the Army and do an operational assessment.
Okay. Talk about what your, this was a program that was originally part of the SCO, the Strategic Capabilities Office. They've done a lot of work. This is based also off of the technology that the Army was working on for a while, the Extended Range Cannon Artillery program, which was moved back into S&T, uses a much longer cannon tube, but you plan on using elements of the IRCA system and taking what SCO has developed. So talk a little bit about what SCO has done to work on both the IRCA, maybe solving some of the issues that the Army ran into with that. And some of the work that they've done to kind of bring this technology to bear so that you can make it Army green, if you will.
Great question. So SCO has done a tremendous effort, and this isn't just a near-term effort for them. They've been working this problem for a while, really working the kill chain, the entirety of the kill chain, so the interferometer radar, all the way, which actually tracks not just the target, but the hypervelocity projectile, because it's steerable. So they've worked that kill chain really hard, and we believe have a good demonstratable capability at this point in time. The IRCA aspect of it was obviously a cannon that was available, and they didn't use the entire system; they used components of it. But certainly the main artillery piece itself, the 58 caliber cannon tube, really good for this type of mission set based on the amount of muzzle velocity that you can get out of that. But we're using it slightly different. We're going with smooth bore for the projectile we have versus rifling. That should help with some of the reliability, and also some modifications of some components like muzzle breach, where there were some early issues with IRCA. We have learned from that. A lot of the team the Army's had working on this program has been embedded with SCO, as well as taking the lessons learned from the IRCA program so that we don't have to relearn those as we do our next level of prototyping.
When we come back, our personal finance advisor is back with her latest tips. Don't go away. Welcome back. On this episode of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union is back with her latest tips on being financially savvy.
Ever heard of smishing? If you haven't, don't worry, you're not alone. Most people have never heard of it, but SMS phishing or smishing has become a widespread scam you need to know about. Smishing is when scammers use fake text messages to trick you into giving out your personal info, like passwords or account details. The messages often appear to be from a trusted source like your bank or popular service companies. They try to create a sense of urgency so you'll react impulsively and give away sensitive info. For example, you might get a text saying your account had been compromised, asking you to click a link to verify your ID or account information. The best way to protect yourself is to never click on links in texts or emails for that matter. Instead, contact the company directly to check your account status. Also, be on the lookout for other telltale signs of smishing like generic greetings, poor grammar, and unexpected requests. Staying informed and vigilant about the latest fraud schemes is your best defense against scammers. And above all, remember, if an offer seems too good to be true, it probably is. And follow the golden rule of fraud protection. Always keep your personal info personal.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, peer through the fog of war to find militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most informed non-com in the brigade, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning to bring you the most recent headlines. Lastly, if social media is where you collect open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And just like most junior troops, we're on TikTok, so go find us there as well. After the break, you can't have a modern army without a network, and you can't have a network without the threat of someone hacking it. What are we going to do? Answers when we come back. Let's talk command and control. In modern times, it all happens in a cloud of technology between forces networked together. You can't move brigades of troops and dispense orders over a wide area in a fight without it. Do it badly, and your enemy will know your plans. To talk about the latest in this space, Defense News' Jeff Zuzulowicz sat down with two experts to hear about what's ahead in Army C4ISR.
Network access, security are so critical to the Army's efforts to field a truly connected fighting force, and making those networks secure is obviously a top priority. In this panel, we'll be discussing the role networks play, spectrum superiority, and access in contested or denied environments. First question, General, I'll throw to you. Stated simply, how does C4 dominance fit into overall military strategy today? And what does that look like, or how does that play out on the field?
In my judgment, the nation or the actor that does the best job at embracing the power that digital technologies are giving the world of C4ISR, command, control, communications, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, they will emerge triumphant in future wars. All the actors or nations that do not, they will be the defeated nations. They will be the defeated actors. This new era of digital transformation that we are still hurtling through will define who are the winners and who are the losers for the foreseeable future. Finally, it begs the question, not just for the United States, but for the United States and all of its partners and allies around the world. While we may, in many cases, be wealthier or more advanced or more productive than some of our adversaries are we willing to go as fast and accept the risks necessary for embracing new technologies that are emerging at an ever-accelerating rate? Because our adversaries and our competitors certainly are.
My simplistic Air Force brain, when you talk C4SI, ISR, really works in the OODA loop, right? I mean, if you really think about it, the observe, orient, decide, act. If you really think about the ISR piece, it's really about observing and orienting yourself. And the C4 piece is about deciding and making actions, right? And the whole goal is to really get inside your adversary's OODA loop. And what you've seen with technologies is they change. And I think what you really see, I mean, a commercial world is a really good example of command and control and kind of orienting yourself. Is if you looked 15 years ago, if you had a credit card and it got stolen by somebody, you might not be able to see the fraud on it for a month because nobody notified you. Now, you go shop somewhere you've never shopped before, and they notify you instantaneously of what's happening. So when you look at our ISR systems, and this is where I think it kind of gets interesting to General Nagata's point, is we have a gazillion ISR systems, but none of them are really connected together. You know, each service is kind of independent. We have defense agencies that do the same thing. If you really want to pull all this together and you want to get inside your adversary's OODA loop, you need to tie them all together.
Would you like to add anything to that, sir? That balance of kind of speed and quality, or is it a trade-off to a degree?
It is a trade-off, but it's a trade-off that we need to approach with a view towards being risk tolerant. Unfortunately, in large governments, in wealthy governments, the larger they become, the more wealthy they become, the more reluctant to take risks they become because there's more to protect. And that's logical, it's understandable, it's human. But in the domain we're talking about, where the proliferation of new technologies and increasingly powerful technologies is accelerating. It's not a linear change. It's an exponential change. Any actor who is unwilling to take significant risk in embracing those technologies, recognizing some of them will fail, some of them will be disappointing, some of them may backfire. But aversion to risk is poison to the objective of embracing the future. And unfortunately, large governments tend to be bureaucratic. One thing I learned in my long military career, the one thing all big bureaucracies hate is taking a risk.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.